Well, it's Ukraine's civilian population that bears the brunt of the war's burden. A report compiled now by the Associated Press alleges Russia is holding thousands of Ukrainians in detention centers in Russia and occupied areas of Ukraine. Hundreds of civilians are said to be used for slave labor, forced to dig trenches and other fortifications for the enemy army. And in line with the findings of other reports, the AP has recorded accounts of routine torture and mistreatment of arbitrarily detained civilians at the hands of Russian troops.
Olyena Yahupova is receiving treatment for the injuries inflicted on her during 5 months in Russian detention. She was arrested in the Zaporizhia region in October last year. It's unclear why, but she was interrogated about her husband, who's a Ukrainian soldier. The methods she says the Russians used amount to torture.
They tied my hands and feet to an office chair and beat me on the head with a 2-liter bottle of water. This alternated with putting a plastic bag on my head. They wrapped tape around my neck, and one person held my nose like this, through the bag.
Before fleeing captivity, Yahupova says she was forced to dig trenches. Satellite images confirm the existence of trenches in the regions she says she was forced to work.
They dug all day until dark, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, sometimes till 4 in the morning. Armed guards shone their torches into the trenches to show where to dig. People worked until they couldn't anymore. Their hands were numb and they couldn't unbend their fingers.
Here, Victoria Andrusha is teaching a class in Brovary in territory controlled by the Ukrainian government. She was released as part of a prisoner exchange last year. Soldiers detained her after finding pictures of Russian armoured vehicles on her mobile phone.
They locked me in a separate room and burned a piece of paper nearby and said, "We will turn on the gas and you will burn." There were moments when they threatened me. They took out metal tools, saying, "We will cut your body into pieces. We will quarter you."
The AP accounts mirror findings from Human Rights Watch. The group found that Russian troops routinely tortured detainees held in makeshift prisons in the city of Izium before it was liberated last year.
Kateryna Busol is a Ukrainian lawyer and senior lecturer at Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. Welcome to the day. Ukraine says thousands of Ukrainian civilians have been detained by Russia. How well documented is this practice?
Good evening. It's quite hard to speak about the numbers. There have been the numbers voiced by the Ukrainian government of around 4,000 unlawful civilian detainees. Human rights NGOs, such as the Media Initiative for Human Rights, which are also mentioned by the Associated Press in their reporting, have reported higher numbers. I, as a lawyer, would caution against believing any specific numbers at the moment, simply because so many people would have security concerns. Their relatives in government-controlled areas would have security concerns about speaking as to the number of their relatives in temporary non-government-controlled territories. Therefore, we may just say that this number is extremely high, first, and it leads up to the 1,000. And second, that the patterns both of unlawful civilian detention and the detention of the prisoners of war and the inhuman conditions in which these people are held have been seen since the beginning of Russia's aggression against Ukraine since 2014.
There is ample evidence, but Russia still denies it's holding innocent Ukrainian civilians.
Well, there is ample evidence from a multiplicity of actors. For instance, the UN Commission of Inquiry on Ukraine, in its report from March 2023, has described the places of detention where both civilians and prisoners of war were held. It interviewed people from recently liberated areas, from Kharkiv areas, from Izium, from southern and southern eastern Ukraine, who did confirm unlawful detentions, both of civilians and the prisoners of war, who did confirm the inhuman treatment there and the different modalities of torture. For instance, the quite widespread method of torture, both of women and men, is the electrocution of their genitalia, of connecting the electricity to their genitalia, and sometimes that would be called a call to Putin. So these patterns have been reported by the UN Commission of Inquiry. They have recently been reported by the UN in a separate report on the places of detention. Numerous human rights NGOs, the Media Initiative for Human Rights Centers, MENA, has reported on that. Moreover, the UN Special Rapporteur on Torture several weeks ago confirmed that there are quite strong allegations of the widespread use of torture methods against both civilians and prisoners of war of Ukraine who are under Russia's control. Yeah. And most importantly, the Special Rapporteur has noted there is a growing evidence that such torture has sanctioned character, essentially that it's sanctioned from authorities up to the ground.
It is an incomplete picture, but a very clear one. The woman we saw on the report, she didn't know on what grounds she was being detained. How arbitrary are these arrests?
It appears that it's quite arbitrary. First, even before the full-scale invasion, there was a widespread information that Russia had the so-called extermination lists, which would concern the Ukrainian activists and people associated with the government and the armed forces. The UN Commission of Inquiry, for instance, in the March report of this year, to which I referred, confirmed the findings and said that usually the civilians who would held pro-Ukrainian or who were deemed to hold pro-Ukrainian views, the civilians who held a particular influence in their communities or were the members of the local authorities, teachers, they were targeted the most, as well as, of course, people who were members of Ukraine's armed forces previously or were their family members.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the children, because thousands of minors have been forcibly transferred from occupied territories to Russia. Many of them are allegedly being brainwashed now, placed in Russian families. How are efforts advancing to rescue them and bring them back to their families in Ukraine?
Well, at the beginning of our conversations, I cautioned us, again, being very attentive to specific numbers. Well, I'll just mention that so far, the most widespread number that the Ukrainian government has alleged is that it's around 20,000 children who have been deported. Again, the numbers appear to be much higher to various NGO reporting. And while Ukraine has managed to return around 300, just 300 of such children, the government has claimed that it was mostly the efforts of still NGOs, but not much cooperation on Russia's side. And indeed, Russia simplified the adoption procedure for such children. And as we know, the members of the highest echelon of Russia's government, from the president to his commissioner for children's rights, have been praising the way Russia allegedly embraces these Ukrainian children, which led them to receive 2 arrest warrants from the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court on the alleged war crime of unlawful deportation of children.
That was Ukrainian lawyer Kateryna Busol. Many thanks for your insights.
Thank you very much.